Hello, and welcome to the Godot community for High School Visual Art 3D.
It's time to pour my plaster into my mold. So I've made sure that I've stirred it up with my hand and I felt around for any larger chunks. And if I felt a chunk, I either took it out of the plaster if it was hard, meaning it had come into contact with water at some point, or if it was just a lump, then I just squished it and mixed it in with the rest of the plaster. So my plaster is starting to set already, as you can see. So we don't want to wait any longer. And this is actually pretty stiff. But I think we're doing all right. So I want to make sure that I've poured enough plaster to cover my mold, and then, get wherever the highest point on my mold is. I want to make sure I've got at least a half an inch. And I'm shaking it like this because I want to drive any air bubbles up to the top. So you can see a couple of these air bubbles. You can also tap the side, and that will help drive some of those bubbles up to the top. And if you have any extra, this is a good opportunity to get out some plastic bowls and make yourself some hump or slump molds. But otherwise, you want to discard of the plaster in a trash can. You do not want to throw this in the sink. It will harden up in any plumbing, and then you might have to literally have the plumber saw your pipes out to get rid of it. I usually keep plenty of newspaper on hand for my students. So I'm going to use paper towels because that's what I have handy today. And we do as much cleaning as we can by just wiping out whatever container we use to mix the plaster. And then once it's been pretty much eradicated from just the paper towel, I will have them rinse outside and let it go in the drain. But usually by the time they've wiped the bowl out, there isn't a lot left behind. And then that bowl can be used again for plaster at a later time. So my plaster is hardened. As it's undergone this chemical change, it's gotten hot. The kids always think that that's so cool that they can feel the heat that is generated by that chemical change. If we flip it upside down, we can see that my tile, which is about this size, had some plaster leak underneath it, but that should not really be that big of a deal. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my plaster from my container. So this is one of the reasons that you want to be using plastic. You want to be able to release the mold from the container. So for those of you that are watching that are cringing because I'm working with this plaster on my clay surface, I will give this a good washing when I'm done. So from here, we're going to find out if I did or did not have undercuts. So this is the waste mold. This mold that we made, or this positive that we made, is not going to come out intact. We're going to have to dig it out. You want to make sure that whatever you're using to dig it out does not harm the mold. I'm going to go around and kind of break around the edges So I'm just breaking the edge where that plaster seeped or leaked underneath my tile so that I will get an idea of where. You'll see that it shifted also, probably for me knocking it around to drive those air bubbles up. It's gotten kind of crooked, but I still think I have enough thickness here for the wall. So let me see. I'm going to be really careful with my tool choices. So I think I'm just going to go in with my hands. This is definitely throwaway clay. This clay is not going to be recycled because it's going to have a bunch of plaster in it. And if my release agent did its job, then it should at some point, there we go, start pulling up from the surface fairly easily. So it doesn't look like I have any undercuts. One way that you would be able to tell is if I had bits of plaster underneath or stuck into some areas, or if as I pulled this up, parts, I ripped that myself, but parts of the design would have gotten ripped up as well. From here, I will take a paintbrush and I will clean any extra chunks of plaster out. And I will also take an X-Acto knife or some other tool, and I'll take this little lip off that was created by that plaster seeping in underneath my mold. And at this point, the plaster's really soft because it's wet. So it's easy to carve and clean. So if you did have undercuts, this would be a nice time to fix those. Now, I will not be able to cast with this mold right away because you can't cast unless your mold is completely dry. And depending on the thickness of your mold, that could take anywhere from a couple of days to a week or more. So you want to make sure that as you are planning that you take that into consideration when you are planning out your lessons, that it's going to take some time for your molds to set. So once it's dry, since we've checked for undercuts and we've pretty much cleaned it up, it is ready to go.